The sun was a searing orange ball over the desert base of Davis Mountain in Arizona. Major Evelyn Riley, call sign Rogue, walked with a heavy, deliberate pace toward the briefing room. Evelyn was a natural pilot, better than most of the men who flew beside her, but she carried a reputation. It wasn't about skill. It was about her questions. She asked too many. She checked the fuel lines twice, the ordnance load 3 times, and the weather reports 4. Her peers called her the librarian. Evelyn was not a flashy pilot. She was a meticulous one. She flew the A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, a tough, ugly plane built to take a beating and keep flying. It was a perfect match for her own stubborn spirit. She knew every rivet, every gear grind of her plane Valkyrie. And right now, something felt wrong. The source of the tension was the man sitting at the head of the briefing table, Colonel Marcus Hayes. Hayes was polished, smooth, and more focused on his next promotion than the safety of his pilots. He saw Evelyn's diligence as defiance and her caution as weakness. "Morning, Major Riley," Hayes said, his smile failing to reach his cold eyes. "Glad you could join us. I trust your paperwork is in order?" Evelyn ignored the dig. "Colonel, I have concerns about the fuel mixture we received last night. The readings on the last batch were erratic, and I logged a maintenance request." Hayes leaned back, his chair creaking slightly. The room, full of 10 other pilots, instantly went silent. "That request was closed, Major. The mechanic signed off." "Are you suggesting they're incompetent, or perhaps that you have a better understanding of jet fuel than our entire ground crew?" Evelyn held his gaze. "Sir, I'm suggesting that when we're flying close air support 5,000 miles from home, cutting corners on the cheapest part of the mission is reckless. My Warthog Valkyrie feels heavy. Something isn't balanced," Hayes laughed, a short, sharp sound. "The A-10 is a flying tank, Major. It can haul twice what we're asking it to. You're flying the priority run into the Al-Qadar Valley. It's a milk run, a simple show of force. We need you to take out a few outdated communications towers. Nothing tricky." He tapped his pen on a file. "If you can't handle the heat, Major, stay on the ground. We have pilots who trust the chain of command." The implication hung heavy in the air. "You are weak. You are a problem." Evelyn felt the familiar heat rise in her chest, but she mastered it, nodding once. "Understood, Colonel. I will proceed as ordered." But as she gathered her gear, she saw the file Hayes had been tapping. It wasn't a standard mission report. It was a requisition form for a massive emergency fuel transfer dated 2 days ago, well before the problem was supposedly fixed. Hayes was running a shadow operation, swapping out high-grade, expensive fuel for cheaper, lower-quality stock and pocketing the difference. Her mission wasn't just dangerous, it was a distraction, and her complaints were a threat to his bottom line. Evelyn knew if she failed, he wouldn't just close the file. He'd bury her reputation, too. The air in the hangar was cool and metallic, smelling of oil, hydraulic fluid, and high-octane life. This was Evelyn's true home, away from the starched uniforms and slick politics. She walked onto the tarmac toward Valkyrie. The A-10 looked like a beast sculpted for a single purpose: destruction and survival. Its nose was dominated by the terrifying GAU-8 Avenger cannon. Her ground chief, Master Sergeant Dale "Mac" McMillan, a man whose face was a road map of 30 years in the Air Force, was waiting. Mac was Evelyn's only true, trusted ally on this base. He didn't speak much, but he listened. "Morning, Rogue," Mac muttered, wiping grease from his hand with a rag. "She's loaded heavy." The colonel pushed for the full armor package. Says better safe than sorry, which, coming from him, means something is rotten. Evelyn climbed the short ladder and ran her hand over the cold, rough skin of the fuselage. "It's the fuel, Mac. I know it. She's too quiet. She's asking for a fight, but she's not ready for one." Mac paused, dropping the rag. "I rerouted the lines you asked for. Put a manual shutoff on the auxiliary tank bypass. If that cheap stuff touches the main pump, you flip the switch. It's crude, but it'll buy you maybe 10 minutes to get clear." He looked her straight in the eyes, his own wrinkled with genuine concern. "You're flying into a black hole, Rogue. Hayes cleared this route too quickly. They usually take 3 days to clear a route this deep. He gave us 3 hours. Evelyn felt a familiar pull in her gut. It wasn't fear, but clarity. She saw the trap now. Haze wanted her out of the way, and a downed plane in a remote location would solve his problems, pinning the failure on her meticulousness. Pilot error due to excessive caution. She thought of her childhood in a quiet suburban town in Georgia. The daughter of a high school teacher, taught that the only thing stronger than intelligence was integrity. That's why she flew, not for glory, but for the principle of defending those who couldn't defend themselves and doing the job right. "Thank you, Mac," Evelyn said, her voice quiet but firm. "You saved my life before I even left the ground." Mac only nodded. He knew what she meant. He sealed the cockpit and gave her a single thumbs up, a promise of silence and support. Evelyn went through her checks, the simple sequence of switches and lights a comfort. The engines roared to life, a deep, comforting vibration that became a part of her. Valkyrie felt heavy, sluggish, exactly as she had suspected. But she was flying a mission, and she had a job to do. She taxied onto the runway, the massive A-10 a silhouette against the rising desert sun. She looked out at the base, at the row of polished, useless fighters, and then at the dark, powerful shadow of her own ugly, brilliant machine. She was leaving the safe world, knowing the man who ordered her flight wished her dead. As she hurtled down the runway, she transmitted a simple, non-standard message over the base frequency, knowing Mac would be listening. "Valkyrie is airborne. Operating on manual auxiliary. See you in the daylight." The air in the Al-Qadar Valley was thick with heat and tension. Below, the landscape was fractured, a maze of dust, rock, and small, forgotten villages. Evelyn was flying lower than doctrine allowed, but she had to. The poor fuel quality meant her engines were running hotter and less efficiently. She needed to conserve. Her wingman, Lieutenant Dave "Ghost" Peterson, was flying high cover. "Rogue, the towers are ahead. Looks like the intel was right. Old satellite dishes, easy pickings." "Stay high, Ghost," Evelyn commanded, her eyes fixed on the ground. "This feels too quiet, too easy." She began her first pass, the GAU-8 Avenger rattling the air with its legendary sound, a terrifying, throaty roar. The old communication towers dissolved into dust and twisted metal. It should have been the end of the mission. But then, the ground opened up with a burst of fire. It wasn't the outdated small arms the intel had promised. It was heavy anti-aircraft artillery, AAA, new, high-velocity rounds designed to punch through anything. "Contact." "Heavy A, Ghost, they're dug in deep." "This is a hot zone." Evelyn pulled Valkyrie into a sharp, painful climb, the sluggish engines screaming under the pressure. Hayes's trap was sprung. He hadn't just given her bad fuel. He'd given her completely false threat assessment. He had sent her into a well-defended position, counting on the subpar fuel to prevent a rapid escape. "Rogue, multiple heat signatures below you." "Look out!" Ghost yelled over the radio. Evelyn saw the telltale smoke trails, 2 surface-to-air missiles, small but deadly, rising straight up toward her. One was clearly targeting Ghost, who was faster but less armored. The second was coming for her. She flipped the manual bypass Mac had installed. The engines coughed, sputtered, and then caught, drinking the slightly better fuel from the small reserve. "She had seconds! Ghost, brake left!" "I'm going low." Evelyn didn't brake left. She executed the move no pilot should ever make. She dove into the path of Ghost's missile, using her own massive armored fuselage as a shield. The A-10 was built to survive. She knew Ghost's lighter plane wouldn't. She took the hit. The missile detonated on the left engine nacelle. The sound was a horrific, tearing crunch, followed by the shriek of metal separating and the sudden, blinding flash of warning lights. The left engine was gone, trailing smoke and fire. The second missile, thrown off by her sudden maneuver, veered slightly but still struck the underside of the main wing root. The controls went slack in her hands. She was flying an uncontrolled piece of falling scrap. "I'm hit, Ghost!" "I'm out of control." "Eject! Eject!" Ghost was screaming for her to bail out, but Evelyn was wrestling with the dying beast. She had to steer it away from the village below. Had to crash land it near something, anything, that could offer cover. Her last transmission crackled through the comms, choked by static and the roar of the rushing air. "Valkyrie is hit, going down hard. Tell Mac I tried. Tell him I saw the rig." Then silence. The radio cut. The world became a blur of spinning desert and a violent, gut-wrenching crash into a forgotten dune, followed by the total ringing silence of death. Back at Davis-Monthan, the mood was cold. Major Evelyn Riley was officially listed as killed in action, KIA, body unrecovered. The only good news was that Lieutenant Peterson, shaken but alive, had returned in his wingman craft, reporting the intense, unexpected AAAA fire. Colonel Hayes took the stage in the same briefing room, looking solemn, but his eyes held a subtle, victorious gleam. This was the moment of the title's hook. "The preliminary findings are in," Hayes announced, his voice smooth and carrying. Major Riley was lost over Al-Qadar Valley. It was a failure of equipment combined with a difficult situation. He paused for maximum effect, looking directly at the grieving faces of the ground crew. Due to the intense heat and unexpected threat, and with no wreckage recovered in the contested zone, we must accept the terrible truth. The Major made a valiant effort, but she succumbed to the enemy's defense. He leaned into the microphone. "The mission is classified, the region is hostile, and the situation is final. We will hold a memorial service, but the painful reality is this. We will never see Major Riley or the A-10 again." He pinned the failure subtly and cruelly on her reputation. Major Riley was known to be meticulous, even overly cautious. In a high-stress situation, it seems she prioritized a risky defensive maneuver to save her wingman rather than a standard evasive procedure to save herself. A tragic but avoidable pilot error. Mac McMillan, the maintenance chief, stood up immediately, his face gray with fury. "That's a lie, Colonel. She was sent in with bad fuel and bad intel. She reported it. She knew that plane was a brick and she flew it anyway to save your mission." Hayes shut him down instantly. "Sit down, Sergeant. You are emotionally compromised. The flight logs show a standard maintenance check. Your insinuation of misconduct is baseless and insubordination. Consider yourself formally restricted to the hangar pending review." The message was clear. Question the official line and face ruin. Hayes successfully closed the file and started the paperwork for his promotion. A problem pilot was gone, her only real ally silenced, and his corruption remained hidden. Evelyn Riley became a footnote, a cautious pilot who made a fatal mistake. But Mac, alone in his empty hangar, looked at the empty spot where Valkyrie should have been. He remembered her last strange transmission. "Tell him I saw the rig." It wasn't a death message. It was a promise of vengeance. Part 5. Hell on Earth and the impossible journey, Evelyn woke to the smell of dust, burning fuel, and the ringing silence in her ears. She was alive. A miracle, really, a testament to the sheer brute strength of the A-10 Warthog. The plane had broken into 3 main pieces, but the cockpit tub, a veritable titanium bathtub, was largely intact. She was deep inside hostile territory, miles from any friendly line. Her leg was broken, a clean, painful snap, and her body was a canvas of bruises. But Evelyn was tough. She was a soldier first, a pilot second, and she was fueled by one thing: rage. Hayes had tried to kill her. He had lied to her. Now he was bearing her name and reputation. Survival was no longer about escaping. It was about getting home to deliver justice. She spent the first week in agonizing survival mode, using the wreckage as shelter. Simple, clear survival became her focus. She found a small, brackish stream nearby. She rationed the emergency food. She used the sharp edge of a severed piece of wing to cut a crutch from a piece of scrub brush. The pain was constant, dull, and demanding, but she refused to let it win. Then she looked at the wreckage of Valkyrie. The plane was a mess of crumpled aluminum and severed wiring. The left engine was a ruin. The landing gear was gone. No modern fighter could survive this. But the A-10 was different. Evelyn was not only a pilot. She was a mechanic. She remembered every schematic, every pressure gauge, every bypass valve. She started to work. It was an impossible journey, a task born of madness and determination. Using tools salvaged from the cockpit survival kit and the emergency axe, she began stripping parts. She cannibalized the ruined left engine, using its components to repair the fuel lines and pump of the barely functioning right engine. She bypassed every faulty sensor, every electronic control. She converted the landing gear bay into a makeshift skid using armored plating she tore free from the fuselage. It took 3 weeks of bone-weary labor, driven by minimal food and a growing need for revenge. She wasn't building a safe plane. She was assembling a functional, barely flying coffin. She was taking the beast that was supposed to bury her, and she was turning it into the weapon she would use to deliver the truth. Every rivet she hammered, every wire she stripped and spliced was a promise to Mac, and a challenge to Hayes. She was dragging the warthog back from hell not to save her life, but to save her honor. The base was settling into its routine, quiet evening. Colonel Hayes was in his office reviewing his commendation package. Major Riley was history. The fuel report was locked down. Suddenly, the radar technician burst into the office, pale and shaking. "Sir, we have a contact." Unknown aircraft, extremely low altitude, slow-moving. "No transponder, no friendly eye," Hayes scowled. "A drone." "Shoot it down! We can't have unidentified objects crossing the perimeter. Sir, it's not a drone. It's a large signature. It looks like an A-10, but the return is fragmented, barely registering. And the speed. It's barely faster than a car." Hayes felt a sudden cold dread. He rushed to the flight control tower. Looking through the binoculars, he saw it, a shadow in the dusk, moving with the sluggish grace of a wounded predator. It was Valkyrie. The A-10 was barely recognizable. It was scarred, dusty, and missing half its control surfaces. The left engine was a gaping hole wrapped in soot and torn metal. It was flying entirely on the right engine, which sounded like a cement mixer full of rocks. The landing gear was replaced by 2 battered metal skids, glowing orange from friction. It was the physical embodiment of the word survivor. Evelyn, gaunt and focused, brought the plane down on the main runway. It didn't land. It arrived. The custom skids hit the asphalt with a screech and a shower of sparks, dragging the wreckage to a halt directly in front of the main hangar. The entire base was watching. The impossible had happened. Evelyn cut the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. She lowered the battered cockpit ladder, every movement an effort, and climbed out, her broken leg bearing her weight only through sheer will. She was filthy, sun-scorched, and wearing the fierce look of a ghost demanding justice. She didn't look at the cheering ground crew. She didn't look at Mac, who was openly weeping in relief. She walked directly toward Colonel Hayes, who stood frozen on the tarmac. "Major Riley," Hayes stammered, his polished facade cracking. I assumed. This is an impossible feat. We all assumed you were gone." "This is extraordinary." Evelyn ignored his attempt at flattery. She reached into the tattered pocket of her flight suit and pulled out a small bent canister. "This is what caused the explosion, Colonel. A rupture in the main fuel bypass line, a piece of low-grade sealant that couldn't handle the pressure of the cheap fuel you pumped into my plane. I salvaged it from the wreckage." The confrontation moved from the tarmac to a quickly assembled internal inquiry. Hayes tried to dismiss the evidence, citing the trauma and mental instability of a pilot who had been lost behind enemy lines. But Evelyn was a wall of calm, resolute fact. "The rupture isn't the only evidence, Colonel," Evelyn stated, leaning on a salvaged piece of her cockpit. She had refused medical treatment until the inquiry was done. The black box recording from the right engine, salvaged from the wreckage, shows a 3-minute spike in engine temperature well above acceptable parameters, starting 10 minutes after takeoff. This proves the fuel was poor quality, forcing me to fly with the manual bypass, and thus making me slower and less maneuverable when I encountered the heavy 8AA fire. Fire your intel claim did not exist. She then turned to the other pilots and officers. "I was sent on a mission designed to fail, Colonel Hayes. You saw me as a nuisance because I documented your shoddy logistics and cheap fuel swaps. You risked Lieutenant Peterson's life and mine to protect your promotion." She looked directly at Hayes, whose face was now a sickly white mask. "The commander said we'd never see her again," Evelyn said, her voice clear and strong. "But the Valkyrie is more than metal, and I am more than just a cautious pilot. I am a soldier of integrity." The powerful and satisfying twist arrived swiftly. Investigators, now following Evelyn's lead, found the discrepancy in the fuel logs, the unauthorized requisitions, and the paper trail linking Hayes to the cheap, dangerous fuel mixture. Hayes was immediately arrested and escorted from the base. His career and his life of corruption finished. Evelyn received a military medal, but the real reward was the look on the faces of the soldiers who had once mocked her. She was no longer the librarian. She was the pilot who had flown an impossible 3-week-long flight from a graveyard, not out of luck, but out of sheer technical knowledge and iron will. A few weeks later, Evelyn, fully recovered and promoted, stood by Valkyrie, which was now carefully preserved in the hangar, a monument to survival. Mac walked up, his eyes shining with pride. "They're saying you're one of a kind, Major," he said simply. Evelyn touched the battered armor of the Warthog. "No, Mac, we're both just built to last. And we always finish the mission." The commander, a new commander, had said she would never be seen again. But Major Evelyn Riley had returned, dragging her war machine back from hell, bringing not only her own redemption, but delivering a painful, public justice to the man who had tried to bury her.